So I think we should start. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you joining us today for the June briefing. We have so many updates for you this month, and I'll very quickly introduce my colleagues here, whom you can see in the video. We have Jovan Kurbalia. Jovan, it's a pleasure for us to have you with us. Jovan has been on the high-level panel on digital cooperation for quite a few months, so he will share updates related to the report. We have our cybersecurity expert Vladimir Radunovic, and Vladimir will share updates related to cybersecurity. Arvin Kamberi, our cryptocurrency expert, who will also share the updates related to Facebook's new plans, and our e-commerce expert Marilia Maciel, who will share updates related to the trends that we have identified. And I can immediately tell you that they are all related to e-commerce and the digital economy. So once again, thank you everyone for being with us today, and we'll start immediately with taking a look at the events in June. We also have behind the scenes Marco Lotti. Marco is our online moderator, and you can see him type here in the chat. Marco, thank you for being with us, and also Andriana Gavrilovic, who will introduce the regional updates towards the end of this briefing. So a look at the main events in June. June, as always, is a very packed month. Two events in Berlin, Internet and Jurisdiction, the third conference, and that was followed immediately by the MAG meeting. As you know, the IGF is being held in Berlin later this year. G20 ministerial meeting, important because of a trend that we will take a look at related to taxation. African Internet Summit, the launch of the report, first in New York on the 10th and then on the 17th in Geneva, but Jovan will talk about that. ITU Council and the International Labour Conference in Geneva. They were back to back, so it was a very busy time for Geneva. Rightscon in Tunis, Digital Assembly in Bucharest, EuroDig, and from EuroDig we have reports from all the sessions there, over 30 reports. We had our team of rapporteurs at The Hague. ICANN 65, and ongoing is the UN Human Rights Council. A bit late this year, so it will continue until the 12th of July. We will be reporting from digital policy related side events, and the GIP is also organizing a side event there, so we hope to see you for that. I'll switch to the barometer, which is, and we'll highlight on one of the developments which is linked to the events here that you see in June, and that's the report of the high-level panel on digital cooperation. Much expected. I think everyone was waiting for it. So now it is launched. 5 main recommendations, but at this stage I'll give the floor to Jovan. Jovan, could you please very quickly go through the report and what is of the main interest for us? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Stephanie. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are located. I'm sure that quite a few of you have already heard about the main recommendation of the report, but let me just summarize for those of you who are new to the topic. The report was presented on 10th of June in New York, and we had the presentation on 17th in Geneva, and it has basically 5 main sets of recommendations. First one is on the inclusive economy and inclusive society, SDG related, if we can say, recommendation. The second set of recommendation is on building human and institutional capacities, including help desks. The third set of recommendation is on human rights and human agency, including the question of artificial intelligence and the way of sort of providing guardrails for the development of artificial intelligence. The fourth set of recommendations deals with the trust, security, and stability. And the fifth, the last, is on the mechanisms for digital cooperation and overall digital governance. The more specific recommendations are built around this five set of recommendations. And we have been, over the last 2 weeks, we have been socializing these recommendations starting with the event in New York, meeting with the permanent missions, meeting with the UN Foundation. Then we had a session at the Rightscon, at Eurodig. We had the presentation in Geneva on 17th. Yesterday we had a very successful event on unpacking the panel's recommendations. Now, there are two sets of questions that we have been asked during this process. One is about the UN follow-up on that, and the UN is currently discussing exact procedure and exact construct of the consultation process, which will be inclusive, multi-stakeholder, and involving different actors. But in the meantime, following the encouragement from the panel, different organizations started their discussions on the way how they can contribute to the implementation of panel recommendations. For example, Eurodic launched the European consultations, and yesterday we had discussion with actors in Geneva, how they can contribute to the implementation of recommendations. Concrete issues, concrete ideas, concrete proposals started emerging. There are some answers, there are even more questions, but this is the purpose of the consultations, also to ask new questions and to enrich the discussion based on the report. This is more or less where we are today. 5 sets of recommendations, launch on the 10th of June in New York, follow-up events, and currently two basically emerging tracks, one which will be announced shortly by the United Nations, colleagues in the United Nations, and second one which is completely up to the institutions, organization to follow up on specific recommendations. Over to you.
Thank you, Jovan, for that introduction to the report and to the 5 recommendations. For the participants here, please, if you have questions or comments, you can type them and we'll gather them, and our speakers today will comment on them. Jovan, if I may, I have a question which I think is on everyone's mind. What can we expect in the current months, perhaps until the end of the year, in terms of other consultations apart from those that you mentioned and follow-ups?
What we heard from the United Nations, colleague at the UN, is that they would like to hear the views of different communities around this 5 set of recommendations. Therefore, a recommendation will be the building block for the consultation. Probably important date in this process is the Internet Governance Forum in Berlin, in Germany, in November. And we got indication that this UN track of the consultation, or I said UN supported, will last between 6 to 10 months. Important dynamics will be built around celebration of 75 years of the United Nations in 2020, including possible event at the General Assembly in 2020. Secretary General would like to use also this discussion to start reflections on inclusive multilateralism, because one of the topics for the celebration of 75 years will be the question of the current situation in the multilateralism and how to make multilateral cooperation more inclusive. Therefore, there will be a few dynamics, but key event I would say would be the IGF in this year. It will be IGF Berlin.
Thank you, Jovan, for that. And perhaps an additional question. For our participants here in the room, if they feel that they can contribute something substantially, ideas for the implementation of the report, where can they contribute these ideas? Is there maybe an email, or is there a channel that they can use?
Yeah, we will share in the follow-up to this session email. They can contribute if they're from members of the Eurodic community of European. They can definitely contribute from via Eurodic, but we will share the email address of colleagues at the UN who will be basically collecting different contributions. What is very important is to have what I labeled as permissionless diplomacy or innovation. You don't need to ask for anyone's permission to contribute and to engage. What is very important is that we got clear message from our colleagues at the UN that all contribution will be considered in the process once the UN related process is initiated. But please go ahead with your reflections as Eurodic did, or as Geneva community did yesterday at the event here in Geneva.
Thanks so much, Johan, for that. And I very much like the point on permissionless contributions that opens the door and encourages us all to reflect on the implementation of the report. You mentioned the Geneva event yesterday. Yes, in fact, we had a very excellent discussion on the 5 main recommendations and the ideas that can go into the implementation of the report. And as the outcome, we'll share the outcome of that discussion in the next couple of days, and also follow up on online activities that we plan to organize in relation to the report. So for our participants here, please stay tuned to our online activities related to that. And I'm seeing a comment from Vlada. So this year on the 29th October will be the 50 years of the internet. So that's one other anniversary that the internet community will celebrate this year. I don't know whether there are comments or questions for Johan, but until you type them in, if you have any, we'll move to the barometer. We'll move back to the barometer. As you can see, global IG architecture is what we have discussed, but I'll now move to the security aspect. And there are quite a few updates there in the security basket, and I will here invite Vladimir Radunovic to tell us what has happened in the security field. Over to you, Vlad. Then thank you, Johan, for telling us about the report.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, as you said. Security is, as always, hot and on the agenda, and we had a good discussion this morning, Stephanie and I, whether it should actually be one of the trends, the cyber armament, this sort of raising tensions towards possible cyber conflicts. But it appears that it's a continuous trend, unfortunately. This month we have learned maybe a different side of the coin. The news were from mainly the US media, that the US has conducted cyber attacks against Iranian military facilities and control of the missiles. Iran has sort of confirmed that there were some attempts, but they said nothing actually happened. They weren't successful. But that might not be such a news. We knew that this is happening back and forth since Stuxnet and on the other sides as well. But the other news that came again from the US media is that the US is implanting malware into the Russian power electrical grid. This time more strategically and more offensively than before, when they might have been testing the ground and maybe looking into espionage or picking up the information. And this was not confirmed or denied by the US administration, yet they didn't have any issue with the New York Times publishing that. So some experts commented that this might actually be sort of a message by the US government to Russia and probably everyone else, that they're stepping or broadening the aspects of possible targets. Now, there are two interesting aspects in this regard, both regarding Iran and Russia. When it comes to Iran, as I said, it's nothing new, and it was targeting basically the military facilities to some extent. The interesting bit was that the attack occurred in a way, at least approximately, the same moment or the same day when President Trump actually stepped back from the option of a conventional attack against Iran facilities because it wouldn't be proportionate. That's what he said. So some analysts commented that they understood that the cyber attack, in fact, might be proportionate. And this is an interesting perspective looking at the core principles of the international law, proportionality being one of them, that you shouldn't invest or cause too much of the damage in order to obtain a certain goal. And we see maybe a practical example of how the US, in this case, estimated that the traditional conventional attack wouldn't be proportionate, yet cyber attack might be proportionate. So it's an interesting example. The more worrying part is the one on the critical infrastructure and the news that the US is in the critical infrastructure of Russia for the clear reason that all the reports of the UN group of governmental experts, basically the norms in 2015, and these confidence-building measures of the OSCE, and the resolution by Russia, or proposed by Russia and adopted by the General Assembly, which established the open-ended working group, all of them clearly say that the critical infrastructure shouldn't be the target. Yet, on contrary, we see that, and certainly the US is not the only one, we're seeing more and more of the news. It's hard to verify that, but we're seeing more and more of the news that the Russians are within the system of US and the critical infrastructure, and the US is in the system of Russia, and so on. One of the commenters called that gunboat diplomacy, but then the other comments were that in case of the gunboat conflicting one another, the conflict might be very limited. Here, the proportions of the damage, even the victims, if the critical infrastructure, the power grid goes down, is huge and probably hard to calculate. So we see basically again a crisis of the international law and the international agreements, if you wish, and the decisions of the Global Assembly going into something that's definitely not good. We'll see how it goes. On the positive side, the open-ended working group of the United Nations, so the second track of discussions on norms and rules of behavior in cyberspace by states, besides the group of governmental experts. So the open-ended working group started its work in June. It was mainly the organizational session in New York. What we learned is that Switzerland and the ambassador of Switzerland to the United Nations in New York will be chairing the open-ended working group. It will be open to all the countries that are interested. The first session basically managed to get everyone to agree that the decision will be brought by consensus, which is sort of reaffirming the resolution which established it. And then the program will be will be more clear throughout summer. The next session, the first substantive session, will be in September, about the time in autumn when the GGE will also have its first meeting. There are two interesting events around this. One was the OSCE chairmanship in office cyber event by Slovakia, where we had all the major actors on the stage, from Russia to US to UK and the European actors, and it was quite clear division in understandings what the open-ended working group should be doing and what the GGE should be doing, and we're going to follow on that. Maybe a guidance for all of you if you're interested. We have, in a way, redesigned and revamped our GGE page on our GGE and open-ended working group page on Digital Watch. I'll share the link in a minute, and we'll try to explain what the two processes are and follow closely on all the events or the unclear or controversial issues that they will be discussing. So we already updated the map of the members of the GGE, so I invite you to visit and share your feedbacks. And I hope we are not going to repeat this topic again in July. That's all I can say. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Vlada, for that roundup of the security developments. And you mentioned the revamped GGE page, and I'll actually mention it at the end that we've actually relaunched the Digital Watch Observatory. So it has been redesigned and new content added, but I'll leave that until the end. Vlada, there are a few comments for you, but I think Richard's comment against the Russian electrical grid came just as you are about to mention that. So I believe you covered that. Unless there are any more questions or comments for Vlada, we now turn to the trends, because we have three quite substantial trends that we would like to take the time to cover. So I'll very quickly scroll through the barometer, and as usual, the global RG architecture this month, security, digital economy, human rights, jurisdiction, infrastructure, and new technologies were very, very prominent this month, partly due to so many discussions and events taking place. The barometer, more detailed updates will be in the newsletter at the end, which we will publish by the end of the week. But if you would like to dig deeper, please visit the observatory for all the updates that are indicated on the barometer. So moving to the policy trends in June, you probably anticipated that the new cryptocurrency by Facebook is probably shaking the banking system, but here I'll give the floor to Arvin to tell us what the update is, what the impacts, what the implications are. So Arvin, over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And thank you all for joining us for the briefings today. Of course, you heard about this development in all major media outlets. It was all over the news. And it's, of course, the launch of Libra digital currency and the creation of the Libra Association based in Geneva. Libra digital currency is actually an endeavor from the Facebook and their assembled companies, there are 27 of them, which are working on this for a year and a half now, and they finally published the timeline and all other specificities about Libra cryptocurrency. Libra Association, as mentioned, is based in Geneva and will consist from first of all, major money transfer companies like PayPal, Visa, and MasterCard, alongside with Facebook, of course. Then online services or companies, many of them famous, like Uber, Lyft, Spotify, just to name a few, and a consortium of a few telecom operators, from which the biggest is Vodafone. So why is Facebook doing this? Of course, first of all, the entire project is led by David Marcus, which was previously run the PayPal and was one of the creators of PayPal, and of course other programs, let's say Facebook Manager, WhatsApp. He was Facebook's main person for new developments. They're looking at, of course, they're looking at money transfer or in-app purchase for apps all over the internet, like WeChat or Pesa, who are actually doing in-app purchase for whatever reason. There is a net of companies that will actually participate in this program, on which we can buy buy products from using a Libra cryptocurrency. Libra Association is a private let's say, association who will run a private blockchain and will govern the emission of Libra currency and will work on monetary policies around Libra. Libra is what is also called a stable coin that is backed by fiat currency. In the case of Libra, it's backed by a basket of fiat currencies: US dollar, euro, pound, yen, and others. This means that users will be able to buy Libra only with fiat currency, and meaning no mining. So in order to gain Libra, you will actually need to buy it for a fiat currency. What's also specific about Facebook involvement in Libra is that Facebook will be represented by its subsidiary company called Calibra. Calibra will actually create digital wallets to send, receive Libra cryptocurrency and to store transactions data separate from the data which Facebook use for its users. So basically, by creating the Calibra, Facebook is stating that our data, our financial data from using Libra, will not mix with your general data shared on Facebook and other Facebook services, not just Facebook itself, but actually WhatsApp, Instagram, and others, and Facebook Messenger. So Facebook was well aware about their bad reputation regarding the privacy of data, so they're creating a separate company which will be handling these financial transactions. Of course, this can be a creation of Libra, of course, can have a significant impact on adoption of digital currency and cryptocurrencies overall. Why are we saying that? Because all of these payment services was basically like, let's say, WeChat, was basically geolocated. It didn't do cross-border transactions. But with Libra, what is announced is that it will be globally available for everyone, and it will actually create let's say, a network of merchants and online companies. They can interact without intermediaries, without a third side, or some kind of payment processor between them. But nevertheless, that actually brings Facebook and the Libra Association to some regulatory clashbacks. First of all, as I said, the Libra will be backed by actual reserves of fiat currencies, and the Libra Association will create something which is called Libra Reserve, meaning that they will print Libras out of the how many funds there is in this Libra Reserve. Creation of the Libra Reserve by itself is really questionable by all, let's say, current regulation involving crypto assets and involving cryptocurrency around the world. Creation of primary emission of money and Libra investment token, which will be shared to everyone who would like to actually put money in this reserve, is actually a financial security, and that is regulated around the world with strict, heavy regulations on security commissions around the world and other central banks. So what Facebook is actually saying that they will run something similar to the ICO, but then again they will not try to actually comply with the existing regulation, but as they say in their statement, and let me quote, they will work on shape a regulatory environment that encourages technological innovation. So basically, they're looking at change of the consumer protection laws and all regulatory environment concerning crypto assets and cryptocurrencies. Of course, Libra is aiming to reach so-called unbanked people who are not connected to the digital banking services or online banking services, mostly in developed world. But not just that, Libra is going to be a direct competitor to retail banks and others who might actually, let's say, push a bit harder to eliminate Libra and this kind of a decision making. Does this change the face of cryptocurrency? In a sense, yes, because many people will now start using it. Of course, if it implements properly, many people will start using it, sending cross-border transactions, seeing and first time enjoying, to say, all advantages of online banking and online banking services or payment services. So this might be strengthened the position of digital currencies, virtual currencies, and cryptocurrencies, of course. In a most common sense, Libra cannot be called cryptocurrency as we usually know them, like Bitcoin or Ethereum, because they're based on open blockchains. But basically, this one will be a closed cryptocurrency run by the association and will have its own monetary policy. Regulators all over the world were already, just kicking back to it, and we have many announcements. The U.S. Senate and Security Commission already set the hearing on Libra for July 16th. G7 working group on Libra will be created on the next G7 meeting, which is on 29th of June. So Bank of International Settlement also said that they will look close into the Libra regulation and looking to actually try to change a bit from the Libra standpoint of view. And also we have a FINMA and a Swiss regulators who are now also looking at the Libra regulation and how to actually adjust it over the years. I know you will have many questions, and in order to continue, please just type them down there, and on any specific issue of what I mentioned, and I will be happy to answer you in the chat.
Thank you, Arvin, for that. And in fact, you probably are seeing that while you were talking, lots of questions were there. So I'll give you time to look at the questions. There is a question about the link between Libra and the fiat currency. How is Libra essentially different from other cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, and what is the value added of blockchain for Libra? So we'll go through. I'll let you go through the questions, and then we'll come back to this trend in a little bit, perhaps after the end of the three trends. So we'll very quickly move to a second trend related to the online rental businesses, and that's mostly Airbnb. And I'll give the floor to Marilia to tell us what the main developments were this month.
Thank you, Steph. Well, the business models that emerged with the sharing economy, they have been under scrutiny for some time now. I think the underlying trend is that after some initial amazement and support for these platforms, different actors are starting to see that they have some important side effects, and they are trying to deal with these side effects. And if and how to regulate these platforms is a question that these actors have been wondering. We have been following the trend for some time with Uber. Uber and other car-hailing companies have been criticized for the conditions under which their drivers work. They are not recognized as employees, therefore they don't have a labor rights or adequate support from the company. Currently, it is another branch of the sharing economy that is under the spotlight, the online rental business, which Airbnb is one of the most known examples. Regulation has been advanced in several cities around the world, and what happened recently is that 10 major cities around Europe, which include Amsterdam, Berlin, Brussels, Munich, and Paris, they have sent a letter to the European Commission asking the Commission to take some steps to try to either regulate or take measures that would discipline this sector. In this joint letter, the representatives from these cities argued that the explosive growth of this platform has affected the housing market for locals. So the locals have been displaced out of the housing markets. Tourists are renting houses, and they are changing the landscape of different neighborhoods in these European cities. It is indeed a problem when homes can be very lucratively rented to tourists. They disappear from the housing markets, and that pushes the prices up, and that really affects the local populations. So what they are requesting from the European Commission at this stage is that they give priority to that, and they put that into their agenda for next meetings. And the letter, let's remember that it comes in a very timely, time-sensitive moment, because in April there was a non-binding opinion that was issued by the Advocate General of the European Court of Justice. And in this opinion, he said that he believes that Airbnb is part of the information society sector. It should not be seen as part of the real estate agent sector, which means that countries around Europe will be a little bit tied up when it comes to regulating this sector. And these platforms, they would operate more freely across Europe. And that could bring even more severe consequences when it comes to the housing market in the cities that are being affected. There are opposition to this online renting platforms growing in different cities, not only in Europe, but all around the world. There are movements to regulate these platforms happening in New York, in Dublin, in Ireland, in San Francisco even, which is the birthplace of many of these internet platform companies, interestingly enough. And at the same time, there is another movement appearing, which is being called the home sharing clubs. The home sharing clubs are groups of owners of houses that put their houses in Airbnb, and they are interested in preserving the business model of this platform because they are, of course, being benefited by it. They are taken to the streets, sometimes with public demonstrations, and they are putting pressure on the politicians to try to make sure that they don't regulate the sector in a too stringent way. Some of the employees of Airbnb have been connected to this movement, so they are giving support to the movement as well. So the home sharing clubs are also being seen as a way that Airbnb is using to sort of fight back this regulatory movement in a more grassroots level. But I think the underlying trend, as I mentioned in the beginning, is that we will see more and more cities and countries confronted with the need to regulate these platforms, the sharing economy, and some of them will adopt more stringent solutions. Some of them seem to be more liberal. But I think that this is a trend that we will see coming back over and over again when we do our briefings in different sectors of the sharing economy. Over to you, Steph.
Thank you, Marilia, for that overview of the developments that have led us to identify this issue as a trend. I find that one of the most interesting aspects there is the creation of the home sharing clubs, which is basically the people who are in favor, who are benefiting from the renting out Airbnb apartments. And I would say that a lot of people fall under that category, even though not many people are part of those clubs. And I'm not sure, I think this is the first time that we're seeing them, because I'm not sure that there were similar, let's say, ride-sharing clubs when Uber, the woes for Uber started. So quite an interesting development there. Once again, we'll let the comments and the questions come in, and we'll move to the third trend related to taxation, and then we'll go back to questions and comments for all the three trends together. So this month we saw a renewed push for the taxing of the digital giants, and I think in the past few months, now it's past few years, I would say, there has been an oscillation between the global push for the taxing of the digital giants when things go slow. we have seen national rules popping up across quite a number of European countries. So there is this sometimes push for the global developments, and sometimes we see that national countries adopt the go-it-alone approach. This month, the renewed push is coming from the G20 finance ministers, and this is why I mentioned at the beginning that the G20 event was important. So the G20 finance ministers have agreed to compile common rules to close loopholes used by the tech giants. So obviously governments are still unhappy with the situation, and the G20 finance ministers have agreed to develop these rules, to compile these rules by 2020. It does seem a little bit ambitious, considering that other attempts have so far either not seen enough progress or have fallen flat, like for instance the development in the EU. There were proposals last year, last summer, about the EU-wide digital tax, but earlier this year the plans were scrapped completely because there was quite some opposition by Ireland and the Nordic bloc. So at the moment, those who have opposed the EU-wide digital tax have said, let's wait until the OECD finishes the study on the tax rule. So they said they were in favor of a more global approach. But the problem is, as I have just said, that the OECD approach is considered by some countries as painfully slow. And here I'm quoting. And this is why national countries have adopted the go-it-alone approach by developing their own national rules, and among these are French, Austria, Spain. There are quite a few other European countries. So once again, there are three, let's say, tracks related to taxation. The OECD process, which started quite some time ago, and it's ongoing, perhaps a bit slow, but the aim is to have the global agreement for the tax rules. We have on the opposite, let's say, spectrum, we have the national tax rules emerging mostly in the European countries, and somewhere in the middle now there is this agreement of the finance ministers to compile, to develop these tax rules by 2020. And in between all these oscillations of trends, one thing is certain, and that taxation of the digital economy is still and will probably remain very high on the government agendas. So that wraps up the third trend that we have identified, and once again, all the three trends relate to the digital economy, and I think it's the first time that we have identified three trends related to the same basket. At this stage, I think now we'll go back, Arvin, to the trend that you have described, the cryptocurrency trend. Would you like to take the questions and the comments?
Thanks, Stephanie. Yes, I see an interesting debate here in the chat. Well, Richard asked and followed this question, followed several times. It's how is it different from M-Pesa and WeChat? Actually, Libra will not be so different from WeChat and M-Pesa. After all, as I said at the beginning, the PayPal is one of the creators of the Libra Association and will work on the blockchain. So basically, it will look like a PayPal. Let's be fair. It's going to be a new version of PayPal. But what is different under the bonnet is that both WeChat and M-Pesa are regulated by local governments or regulated in an international level, like with agreements, and there is many initiatives around the world. For example, in EU you have open banking and other initiatives who actually are just using an API to connect with payment services. So that at the end, it looks like it's going to look like WeChat, that's for sure. Sending money from the WhatsApp just by saying send 100 Libra to one number, and as they promote it, easy as sending in a message. So basically, yes, the main difference is again regulation. Pesa, WeChat, and other fintech industry is heavily regulated, and mostly do not do cross-border. When they do cross-border, they actually have an intermediaries and have settlement institutions and others who are in the middle and confirming all that. So why blockchain? And as Johan said it in a chat, basically blockchain is there just because of first of all global transactions and fast global transactions, of course, reducing the capacity needed for run this such a big networks. And the other side is let's say hype, straightforward. Why? I mean, because the blockchain is already recognized from many jurisdictions as something that it's still unregulated, or many countries around the world are now keen at presenting, let's say, a positive laws or positive regulation, encouraging blockchain development, encouraging all fintech industry to go in that direction, to cut costs, cut intermediaries, and of course to introduce this notion of trust in financial systems, which is really shaken nowadays, especially for financial institutions. So that's why blockchain. And I had more like also danger of how currency exchange fees and rates will be set. Yes, that is a basic danger in this proposal, and this was not allowed to any company in the world. There are many cryptocurrencies or many other virtual currencies, but they cannot handle the primary emission of money. They cannot handle their reserves. So all of that is under the scope of financial institutions. For example, most prominent stablecoin, Tether, is related to the US dollar, and it's audited monthly by the US Security Commission, meaning issued 3 billion of Tethers needs to have $3 billion of dollars deposited in the bank. And in their proposal, Facebook is not naming the bank. They will put this money on it. They just say we're going to have our reserve and we're going to run it. So it's still unclear how this is even going to be possible, or is it going to be allowed in the first place to have it. And of course, this is because of the questions of how many of them are printed and how they are backed. Are they backed? What is the price related to, I don't know, Japanese yen or euro or dollar? Someone needs to kind of balance all that. For that, we have financial institutions and most of all central banks. So leaving Libra to actually, or Libra Association to govern all this stuff, it is still a tricky thing to do. And on the other hand, why unbanked? Well, in many researches that we had last few years, it's most of people actually do have 3G or mobile phones. This is like most developed network on the world. It's not broadband, but 3G is in developed countries. Cheap phones are all over India, and for example, and India is one of the was kind of promoted to be one of the first markets for this. So unbanked are more on the telephones and on 3G networks than other ways of connecting to the internet. So, let's see, another questions. Yes, the stabilizing and undermining the national systems. Again, this can also be true. Many, let's say, developing countries or users from developing countries can actually make their reserves in Libra, use Libra as a reserve currency, which can lead to actual further deterioration of local currencies, especially weak local currencies and national currencies. So this is also one question to look at. Thank you, Seth.
Thank you, Arvin, for going through the questions. There was a question regarding, I don't know if you answered this already, there was a question about charges, basically whether it will be cheaper for the users to use Libra versus other applications and other cryptocurrencies.
Well, this is remain to be seen, because usually when you interact with the digital currencies, there is an institution in between who take their cuts. So basically, it's some kind of intermediaries or payment processor. But in the case of Libra Association and how they announce it, it's basically they will be all of it. They will be central bank, they will be payment processor, and they will be also retailer. So if this is allowed in this kind of a system, it will be really, really cheap to use it. Let's say no cost at all, except of the bandwidth and internet connection. So, and as I said, to put back, the Libra is a stable coin, so you cannot acquire Libra other than buying it for the fiat money, real money, other currencies, euro, dollar, etc. So if you have a, I don't know what the exchange rate will be, and central bank of Facebook will decide about that, or the Libra Association, the Libra Reserves will decide on that. So basically, it will be the same, but with no cost of intermediaries. So yeah, much cheaper for international transactions. And again, if this is going to be adopted in how it's proposed now. But we all know, just to add, we all know some of the Facebook's great projects. Some of the projects never kicked out. So let's see what's going on with Libra.
Thanks, Arvin, for that. And in fact, as we're saying in the chat, that's the low cost of the transactions will be a major selling point for the users. Obviously, for users, a big consideration is the cost, how much is left in their pockets. So that's, of course, a selling point. I'm not sure whether we have time to answer. Maybe one last question. Glenn is asking about the impact on money laundering. Do you have any thoughts about that, Arvin?
Yes, Glenn. That's really good question. I mean, if allowed in this kind of sense, in this proposed model, how can someone actually, just like plug in a USB stick drive in your computer, load 100,000 of Libras on it, and travel around the world and plug it in another computer? So this is why actually Libra is introducing private blockchain, meaning that it's not censorship resistant or anything. At any given point of time, someone from the Libra Association can seize your money, can actually, just pull it out of your funds, etc. So we're looking for a further clarification about that, but it is one of the issues that regulators are looking at really closely, is to avoid money laundering with this cryptocurrency. That's why actually cryptocurrencies are still in a unregulated or uncharted territory, because of the specific regulations around money laundering.
Yes, exactly. And then in the EU especially, there's a very big anti-money laundering exercise going on, and it's something that the banks are currently facing, so more regulation there. Cryptocurrency is not exempt from this push. I think we recall last year there was a case in the US where the names of the whole, basically the names of the clients had to be revealed. But anyway, so I think the questions are answered related to the cryptocurrency and to the Facebook Libra development. We will cover this in even more detail in the newsletter. So please stay tuned for that. I think both Marilia and myself have answered the questions related to the second and the third trend. So we'll move forward to the last parts of the briefing and then move on to the regional updates. So July and August, they will be as usual quiet months, except that there's the Human Rights Council ongoing in Geneva with so many parallel, side events and a couple of reports being released related to digital rights. And I'll just highlight the meeting of the group of governmental experts on lethal autonomous weapon system in Geneva at the end of August, and that's something that we will cover very closely. From the GIP and the DiploFoundation, this week and the next week are actually a couple of very busy weeks. The event yesterday, we talked about that, and we will share the contributions and the outcomes from that event shortly, in a day or two. We have the newsletter coming out this week, and the summer school ending on Friday. Next week, we will launch the Digital Watch Observatory more broadly. We had a soft launch yesterday in Geneva, but basically the observatory has been redesigned. So we're doing a major process of redesigning the services that we offer under the Digital Watch newsletter a couple of months ago, and now the observatory. But more than that, the observatory is now data-driven more than ever. So on the observatory, you will find more visualizations of data, more infographics, and the applications that we use are extremely user-friendly. So you'll be able to look at the data and extract any information based on the data that you find on the observatory based on your needs. On the 2nd of July, so that's today week, we'll have an in situ only, unfortunately, event which summarizes the main developments in the first 6 months of 2019, and that will be accompanied by a publication. So the trends and the developments that we will review will be shared also in a publication. And related to the Human Rights Council, one of the side events I mentioned earlier one of them is co-organized by the GIP, and also at the end of next week, our online course on AI comes to an end. And that summarizes the next 2 weeks. And here I'll also mention that in terms of the briefing, we'll take a break in July, and we will meet again at the end of August. It's something that we do every year, and it's simply because developments in July and in August are generally slower than the rest of the year. And now it's time to see what has happened regionally, and here I give the floor to Andriana to take us through the regional updates. Andriana? And there she goes.
Hello everyone, this is Andriana from Belgrade. Thank you, Stephanie, for the roundup of developments in June, and for your questions. We now have regional updates, so please stay with us. First, we have Jacob Odame-Biden with updates from the African continent. Jacob will update us on the signed Memorandum of Understanding between Huawei and African Union, and the development in Ethiopia regarding the new telecommunications law. Jacob, over to you.
Hello, good afternoon from Ghana. This is Jacob Odami Badin, and I bring you the regional update from Africa for June 2019. First, Huawei and Africa Union have signed a memorandum of understanding to consolidate their collaboration and put in place the necessary steps to cooperate further on ICT matters. The MOU seeks to strengthen their partnership in the areas of broadband, Internet of Things, cloud computing, 5G, artificial intelligence. His Excellency Thomas Kwesi Quartey, the Deputy Chairperson of the AU Commission, and Philippe Wang, Huawei's Vice President for the Northern Africa region, signed the MOU for the AU and Huawei respectively. The MOU, which lasts for 3 years, offers the opportunity for different AU departments to engage with Huawei in ICT project management and delivery in support of African continental ICT development. Then we go to Ethiopia, where, according to reports, the parliament has approved a draft law aimed at enabling foreign companies to invest in the telecommunications industry. The new legislation establishes an independent communications regulator accountable to the Prime Minister that will be responsible for promoting competition and ensure fairness among players. Mr. Getahun Mekuria, Minister for Innovation and Technology of Ethiopia, in a tweet which was quoted by the report, said lawmakers approved into law the Ethiopian Communications Regulatory Proclamation. This is a huge step in reforming the telecom sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Next, we have Andre Edwards, who will highlight the developments from the Caribbean region. Andre will inform us about the expansion of broadband capacity in the Caribbean and developments from the cybersecurity area. Andre, over to you.
Andre Edwards with Caribbean updates. Fiber optic cable connecting Grenada, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines completed. Part of the World Bank-funded Caribbean Regional Communications Infrastructure Program, CARCIP, National Broadband Project, involves the installation, maintenance, and operation of an undersea cable system for Grenada, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The subsea fiber optic cable has been recently laid through the Grenadines. It is hoped that this increased capacity will have a positive impact on the broadband penetration within St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and significant improvement in the quality of internet services provided locally is expected. GK General introduces cyber insurance product as threats grow. In response to a recent surge in cybersecurity incidents across the Caribbean region, a regional insurance provider, GK General Insurance, has launched a cyber insurance product called Cyber Control. This product will provide insurance protection for individuals and commercial entities with revenue below $10 million. Individual coverage is available as an add-on with homeowners insurance and provides insurance against cyber attacks, ransom demands from cyber criminals, identity theft, and cyber crimes, including phishing scams and credit card fraud. Commercial clients will be covered for interruptions from security breaches, digital assets destruction, costs to manage data breaches, including IT forensic costs, fines and penalties resulting from security breaches and credit card fraud, damage and defense expenses from a legal suit associated with security breaches and infringement of offline or online media expenses, that is, liability and defense costs related to copying offline digital content.
Thanks, Andre. We now have Amrita with updates from Asia. Amrita will update us on Japan's decision to allow the use of self-driving cars on public roads and other developments. Over to Amrita.
Welcome to the regional update from Asia for the month of June. Japanese lawmakers have enacted amendments to the Road Traffic Act to allow the use of Level 3 autonomous vehicles which are capable of driving themselves autonomously but still require a driver at the wheel to resume control if needed on public roads. The amendment will come into effect from 2020. In terms of privacy and data protection, in China, the Cyberspace Administration of China released the draft regulation on the protection of children's personal information online, targeted on network operators who collect, store, process, use, transfer, or disclose personal information related to children below 14 years. China has also released the draft Measures on Security Assessment of the Cross-Border Transfer of Personal Information. As per this draft, personal information collected by network operators and foreign entities can only be sent overseas after a security assessment is done by the provincial level cyberspace administrative department and government permission. In terms of content policy and intermediary liabilities, Sri Lanka is now amending its penal code to include spreading of fake news and hate speech on social media as an offence, with a sentence of up to 5 years imprisonment and a fine of 1 million rupees. This is in addition to the last month's regulation on combating fake news and giving authorities the right to remove hateful content. Thank you.
Thank you, Amrita. At the end, we will hear from Noha Fatih with updates from the MENA region. Noha will update us about the Rightscon conference in Tunis and on internet shutdowns in the region. Noha.
Hello, this is Noha Fathi. The first update in June is regarding internet shutdowns that were reported in Sudan and Algeria. On the 3rd of June, NetBlock has reported internet disruptions. On the same day, the Rapid Support Forces clamped down on the Sudanese demonstrations. According to NetBlock, the restrictions target service providers, which in turn adversely impacted internet connectivity. It was also reported that the military leadership has admitted for the first time cutting the internet, which affected Facebook users who mostly count on Facebook to organize demonstrations. NetBlocks also reported social media platforms were blocked in Algeria on the 16th of June to counter cheating during national baccalaureate school exams. 2 independent news websites, Tout sur l'Algérie and Algérie Part, were reported to be inaccessible since the 12th of June. The second update is regarding Rightscon 2019 that was convened to discuss the impact of technology on society and human rights. Access Now organized the conference in Tunisia from the 11th to the 14th of June with 17 thematic tracks and 450 sessions and more than 1,000 speakers who participated to reflect on the depth of technology's impact on society and human rights. This year, the thematic tracks revolved around election, digital ID, technology-facilitated gender-based violence, and content moderation. During the Human Rights Heroes and Villains, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, spoke of the courage of human rights defenders in the digital world. She noted, saying, "We are here at Rightscon to try to turn that around and ensure that digital tools do not overpower our human rights and instead empower us all to enjoy them." Thank you.
Thanks to Jacob, Andre, Amrita, and Noha for sharing the updates from their regions with us. This brings us to the end of our June briefing. I will now give the floor back to Stephanie. Steph.
Thank you, Andriana, for taking us to the regional perspectives, and thank you also to our curators for updating us. Yes, we're at the end of the briefing for June before we stop for a few weeks for the summer break. But although we paused the briefing, but the updates on the Digital Watch will continue. So we will continue with the regular daily updates on the Digital Watch, and please use the observatory as much as you can to keep up to date with what is happening, regardless of when it is happening. So at this stage, I would like to thank you all for being with us today, and also thank the experts who joined us, and all those part of the Diplo team and the GIP team who work behind the scenes every month to make this happen, and those include Marvin, Marco, and Andriana. So please stay tuned for the newsletter. We hope you find that useful, and see you again on Tuesday, 27th August. Thank you and bye.